Welcome back to the studio. Today I'm set up and I'm going to be recording a couple different of the block of the months in this series so I can have them done in advance. But we're going to start with block number 1. As you saw in the previous video, we took the background fabric, which is kind of this light robin's egg blue, aqua, teal, depending on your color definition. And we cut these up into all of the blocks that we need for the entire series. So I know that I have my background fabric ready. I know that I haven't made any mistakes in it. I've measured each one twice. And I've separated each of the actual blocks with the background fabric, hoping that that is enough to keep me organized. I have the package that the entire kit came in, and you can see that it's a 10 block of the month program. I have this version behind me. This is the one from the office, but you can see I'm going to be using a slightly different color background and color theme. This is one of the nice things about the applique. You can always personalize it with your own fabric for the background. Having said that, I will say a couple other things as well. Almost all of the patterns come with a paper pattern that you could buy just the paper pattern if you wanted to do traditional needle turn applique, or if you wanted to use it for your own raw edge applique where you're cutting out the shapes. That way you could utilize all of this, your own fabric from your stash and personalize it in that way. We also sell SVG files. Those are something that you could download onto your computer, and then you would send those to a machine like a Cameo Silhouette or a Brother Scan and Cut. Those machines are capable of cutting out designs. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics, which means the size can be increased or decreased at your discretion. What you would do is put your own bonding agent, your own fusible, on the back of the fabric, and then you would run your fabric through the machine one color at a time, and it would cut out all the different shapes that you require for each pattern piece. So those are 3 different ways that we sell this product. As a complete kit, as you see here, with the pre-fused fabric, laser cut, that's A. B would be the SVG file, and C would be just the paper pattern that you could order, and it would be mailed to you, and you could go ahead and use your own fabric. So having said all of that, I have my iron hot already. I'm going to go ahead and re-iron my background fabric, and this is just water. I just want to make sure I get all the wrinkles out of my background, because if the background's wrinkled, when you put your applique shape on it and fuse it, that could become a permanent feature. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to add that kind of texture to my quilting. So I have my fabric that's nicely ironed. And what I could do at this point is separate the components of my applique kit. And again, this is month number 1. So I have my color cover sheet, and I have my paper pattern. This is basically what you'd be getting if you ordered just the paper pattern. And when I get my paper out, this may seem a little odd, but I also like to go ahead and iron my paper pattern just to get out the creases from it being shipped folded, because I don't want any of those creases to translate through the placement of my fabric. So I can go ahead and lay my fabric right on top of the pattern, and if you could see through, that's great. If you need to use a light box, that's great also. Those of you that don't have a light box, sometimes people will put the paper on a window or on like a glass patio table with a light underneath it. Because the Steam 2 is tacky, even if this were hanging on a window, the pieces would stick to the background, because that's just the nature of Steam 2. It has that tacky component to the backing once you peel the paper off. So I'm going to go ahead and separate all of my pieces out, and we have the instructions in the back of the package also that tell you the process of this peel, place, and press. And so you could keep that handy for you. I've read it more than a couple times. So I'm going to separate this out and bring it in a little bit closer so you can see me putting these components into place. As you can see, I have all of my pieces laid out in the general area where they are going to be placed. I can follow the color cover pattern sheet, which will help me place the leaves exactly where they'll go. And I like to do that since I am replicating this exactly. If you were picking your own fabric, of course, you could just use these to pick similar colors or values when doing your own design. So at this point, the process is fairly easy. We're just going to start peeling the paper backing, but you'll see this one piece here needed to be folded to get into the packaging. So I'm going to address that first. I'm going to just finger press it flat, but then I'm going to run over it with the iron. And I don't need to use any steam. I'm just going to go ahead and press that flat, because again, I do not want that crease or that fold to translate into the final design. So I'm going to go ahead and let that cool a little bit, and while that's cooling, I'm going to go ahead and start working on some of the other stems. Now, all of these pieces have a paper backing on it, and I usually just fold over the edge of one of the pieces, and that paper backing will just peel right off. I also try and keep all those little pieces in a pile, because I don't want them floating all over my studio later. Sometimes they get a little bit of the stickiness from the back of the steam and seam too, and they'll stick to the floor or to your curtains or whatever. It's a little frustrating. So I'm going to go ahead and place my first stem in place, and notice that the bottom visible part is a little bit rounded. And I'm going to continue peeling these off. You want to use a little bit of a delicate touch as you're peeling those, because these pieces are quite small. And just from finger pressing with that steam and seam 2 is enough to keep these in place. I try and start peeling on the area at the end of these where it's not going to be exposed, in case I fray the fabric just a tiny bit. It will be covered later by the top of the flower. And by now this piece is cool enough to handle, and I can go ahead and peel it off as well. Now that I have all of my stems in place, I can go ahead and start working with some of the other pieces. It's the little tiny ones that I have the hardest time with getting the paper off, because you really want to make sure you don't fray those edges. I think I'll do my feet first. Anything that you see on the pattern where it changes from a solid line to a dotted line, the dotted line simply means that that component goes behind another one. So in the case of both the stems and these feet, they are tucked underneath the body, or with the stem, they're tucked underneath the flower. Also, you can notice that you can always pick up a piece after you've laid it down in case you need to reposition it. If you've covered over a piece, you can always lift up the fabric to see where the placement of that item is, or just look at the color cover sheet. All I'm doing is peeling, placing them where they go, and then we'll press when we're finished. I always find this kind of soothing. It's almost meditative. In many ways, this is like paint by number or some kind of a coloring book. So you could have people from all different age groups helping with this. And you would determine, oop, I just lost my eye. You would determine for yourself what they're capable of doing. They could just put the color pieces on the paper pattern and leave the paper backing on it. They could peel the paper off if they have that skill level and place those onto the background. And also they could help with the ironing if they're capable of working with the iron, but only you're going to know that. I've also said many times, the nice thing about having this be a multi-generational project is that when they grow up and they look at this again, they will have the memory of helping their mom or their grandmother or their aunt make that item. And so it becomes more of an emotional connection to it rather than just something that they had as a child or something that was floating around the house. We often do this thing where we have different size circles. Here we have it. We also have it with the eye, which I let roll off of the table. So I'm going to have to find my eye. But part of the whimsy of this is how off-centered those are. So I never place them directly in the center. I always like them to be a little more whimsical. And as we're doing this in real time, you can see that it's a fairly easy process. I always put it down to my humidity level where I'm at in the country, but my papers always peel off very nicely. But I do keep generally a pen in my cutting table, and if you ever have a problem with one of the papers sticking, or if you just want to get into the habit of doing it, you can score the back with the pen, which will cut through the backing paper and allow it a place to fold and open up. Now I don't usually have to do that because, as I said, the humidity level here is such that my papers release right away. If you ever have the experience where the fusible web is not completely adhered to the back of the fabric, then all you have to do is put the paper back on, refuse it in place, and let that cool for a few seconds. This is a really adorable block. It's perfect right now because we are still in spring, and this feels exactly like spring. You have the birds and the flowers all jumping out of the garden. The little papers are sticking to my fingers. Aside from my little eye, which I'm going to have to crawl around on the floor and try and find, I have all of the pieces in place. If you find that you don't like the composition or you don't like where something's placed, like that little dot, you can always lift it up and replace it, because at this point, while it is tacky and sticking in place, it's not fused permanently. So we still can move things around. But I'm going to go ahead and find my eye, and then we'll get on to the fusing process, which is the last step for this block. I have all of my applique pieces in place. So I've gone through the first two steps of the process, which is peel and place. Now I'm going to press. I do not keep water in my iron because I've had too many irons leak. I know that if I do not put water in the iron cannot leak. So I just use some kind of a little spray bottle that will add my steam component to the block. So I'm just going to steam or spray the top of my applique with my spritz bottle, and then I'm going to cover this with my little pressing sheet. Actually, my little pressing sheet isn't little, it's kind of large. The pressing sheet does me quite a few favors. One thing is that the pressing sheet protects my iron sole plate from getting any of the fusible material from in between the layers onto the sole plate. So then I don't have to clean my iron. It also protects the edges of the applique, because sometimes I get lazy and I will shift the iron side to side, which the sole plate edge will catch the edge of the applique and crinkle it up. And then I will fuse it in place, and I've fused a crinkled applique shape, which I don't want. The other thing it does, it prevents me scorching the background fabric or the applique with an iron that perhaps is too hot. And it also just helps in general, keeping everything nice and flat and crisp as it's cooling back down. The Teflon pressing sheet also kind of traps that steam in there so that I know that we're really activating the fusible material. You cannot overheat the steam 2, so you don't have to worry about that. Usually people will underfuse rather than overfuse. How much time does it take? Well, that's going to depend on your iron, your heat setting, and your environment. So I can't give you a specific second count, how many seconds it would take, because it's going to be slightly different for everybody. One thing that I can tell you is that I always fuse both from the top and the bottom, because I want to make certain that I have activated that fusible web through all of the different layers of the applique. The flower, for instance, we have the background, the flower, the center, and the very middle of that applique. Also, you have the stem under there. So you really want to make sure that the heat of the iron has plenty of time to penetrate through all of those different layers. So after I'm done ironing this side, I'll flip the whole thing over again, remist it from the back, and I will go ahead and fuse the whole thing just as I am now from the front. I'll do it again from the back. So I fused this applique both from the top down, and then I turned it over and I ironed it again from the back down. And both times I applied some of the water from the mist bottle. So this is our first month done. Many people ask if we top stitch our applique or what stitch you should use if you're going to top stitch. And we have never enjoyed the process of top stitching over all these little pieces. Unless you are really good at that particular process, it's not necessarily going to add anything to the design. In fact, it could diminish it a little bit, which is fine if that's what you want to do, to the look that you want with stitching on it. We just quilt over the whole process. And if you fuse this properly from the start, you're not going to have a problem with it peeling off. We have taken one of our aprons and done the gobble gobble turkey design and washed it over 24 times and put it in the dryer 24 times. What you will get is a very soft edge around the applique, which is what you always get with a fusible applique. So it's not going to change the final look by adding stitching on it. We just quilt over it. So we have our first block that is finished, and just to show you where it goes, I'm just going to pin it up here. That's our first block finished, and I'm always a little questioning when I start something new if I've made the right choice with background fabric. And in this particular case, I really like this background fabric. For me, it has that vintage aqua color to it, which I just think about when I think of the RVs, the Love Bug, the campers. So to me, it was pretty good. But that'll be something that you could judge yourself. So I want to thank everybody who have been subscribing to both the Facebook page and the YouTube channel. It really helps when you engage in any way, allowing other people to see it. So if you comment, if you share, if you like the video, a thumbs up, or you subscribe, all of those things allow the algorithm of either YouTube or Facebook to increase the viewership. So you're helping other people who also like quilting see these items. So we really appreciate it that you are doing that. Thanks for your time today. I'm already set up, so after I cut this video, I'm going to go ahead and start another one so I could get a little bit ahead, because it's going to be a busy summer. We have some special things planned for later in the year, and I have to be working on those as well. So thanks for stopping by today, and we'll see you again next month.